"I just need some space tonight," my new husband said, turning his back on me and our marriage bed. I sat there alone in my perfect white dress, listening to the silence until faint whispers led me down to the old wine cellar. He had no idea the woman he abandoned in that room would not be the same one he had to face in the morning. Here's the story of how I took back everything he tried to destroy. Before the silence in that room, there was this. Sunlight streamed through the old vineyard chapel, dust motes dancing in the golden hour light as I watched Ethan say, "I do." His eyes locked onto mine, holding a promise that felt as real and solid as the ring on my finger. A perfect man, a perfect promise. My best friend Chloe stood beside me, her eyes shining with tears. She smiled, stepped forward, and adjusted his tie for him. A strange, fleeting gesture. But who questions the details on a perfect day? That afternoon, surrounded by everyone we loved, my world felt complete. It was unshakable. I truly believed I had everything, or so I thought. The night air grew cooler, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of the Napa vineyards. Our reception was winding down, a beautiful blur of fairy lights, clinking glasses, and the soft melody of a string quartet. Laughter echoed from the last remaining guests as they finally said their goodbyes, their words of congratulations trailing off into the darkness, leaving a warm, pleasant hum in their wake. I leaned against Ethan, my head on his shoulder, the weight of my dress a heavy but happy burden. The day had been perfect. Every single detail, every rehearsed vow, and every spontaneous smile. It was the kind of perfect you see in movies, the kind you don't dare to believe can be real. As we stood near the stone archway, Chloe pulled me aside, her eyes shimmering under the soft patio lights. She pressed a small, heavy box into my hand. "I wanted to wait until it was just us," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a silver locket. It was simple, elegant, with a single, delicate initial engraved on the front, an I for Isabel. I lifted it from the box, the metal cool against my skin. It felt timeless. "Chloe, it's beautiful," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "For my sister, not just my friend," she replied, her hand covering mine. "So you'll always keep our bond close to your heart." No matter what. I felt a lump form in my throat. We had been through everything together since we were kids, two halves of the same whole. This felt like a seal on that promise. Nothing could ever change that, I promised, and she helped me fasten the clasp around my neck. She hugged me tightly, a hug that lasted just a second too long. I held on to her, feeling the cold, unfamiliar weight of the locket between us, a promise of forever. Our footsteps were the only sound as Ethan and I walked the gravel path to the private villa reserved for our wedding night. He was quiet, but I figured it was the exhaustion of the day finally setting in. I squeezed his hand and he squeezed back, but it felt distant, automatic. I told myself to stop overthinking. I was a wife now. This was the first night of the rest of our lives. The room was breathtaking. A grand four-poster bed was covered in deep red rose petals. A fire crackled softly in a stone fireplace, and a bottle of expensive champagne was chilling in a silver bucket beside two crystal flutes. It was a scene ripped from a romance novel, a perfect backdrop for a perfect night. I felt a flutter of nervous excitement. This was our beginning. I kicked off my heels, turned to him, smiled. But Ethan didn't smile back. He avoided my eyes, his gaze fixed on some indistinct point over my shoulder. He moved with a strange, mechanical stiffness, placing his wallet and keys on the antique nightstand with a soft thud. He loosened his tie, not with the playful anticipation I had imagined, but with a heavy, weary sigh that seemed to suck the air right out of the room. I walked towards him, my dress rustling softly against the hardwood floor. I placed a hand on his arm, and I could feel the tension coiled in his muscles, hard as stone. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He finally looked at me, but his eyes were like glass, empty. "I'm fine, Isabel. Just tired." His words were simple. The tone was devastating. He saw the hurt in my eyes, the confusion. A flicker of something, annoyance, maybe even guilt, passed over his face before it went blank again. "Look," he said, taking a step back, creating a chasm between us. "I think I just need some air. I need some space tonight." Space? On our wedding night? The words didn't compute. My mind raced, trying to find a reason, an excuse. Had I done something? Said something? The perfect day began to fracture, tiny cracks spreading through the beautiful illusion. I just stared at him, unable to form a response. He didn't wait for one. He walked to the door. He didn't look back. He didn't say goodnight. He just pulled the heavy oak door closed behind him, the click of the latch echoing through the silent room like a gunshot. And I was alone in my wedding dress, in a room built for two. The champagne remained unopened. The roses on the bed felt like a cruel joke. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crackle of the fire he had left behind. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress barely dipping under my weight, feeling small and invisible. I replayed his words, his tone, his empty eyes. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. My gaze drifted around the room, searching for an answer that wasn't there. It swept past the fireplace, the champagne, the windows looking out into the black night. And then it landed on the nightstand. His wallet, his keys, his watch, his Rolex, the one his father had given him for his 30th birthday. The one he never ever took off, unless he was getting in the shower or going to sleep for the night. He said he was going for a walk. He needed air. A man going for a walk wouldn't leave his watch. A cold dread, sharp and sickening, began to creep up my spine. He wasn't just tired. He wasn't just going for a walk. He was lying. He left. But there was one thing he forgot. The watch on the nightstand wasn't just a clue. It was an invitation. A loose thread in a story that was starting to unravel. My breath hitched, a knot of ice forming in my stomach. He wasn't just taking a walk, he was with someone. And my heart, in its own stupid, stubborn way, already knew it didn't want to find him. But I had to. The not knowing was a poison, and I needed the antidote no matter how bitter it tasted. I slipped out of the heavy wedding dress, leaving it in a white heap on the floor like a ghost of the woman I was just an hour ago. I pulled on a silk robe, the fabric feeling thin and useless against the sudden chill in the air, and stepped out of the villa, barefoot. The gravel path was cold and sharp against the soles of my feet, each step a small, grounding pain. The vineyard was bathed in an eerie moonlight. Rows and rows of sleeping vines stood like silent skeletal witnesses, their leaves rustling in a soft, mournful breeze. The air smelled of damp earth and fermenting grapes, a scent that was romantic at sunset and vaguely funereal now. I walked towards the main estate, my eyes scanning the darkened windows, the empty patios. Nothing. The entire world seemed to have fallen asleep, leaving me as the only soul awake in this nightmare. Where do you go when you need to hide? As I passed the old stone building that housed the wine cellar, I stopped. A sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible. A low murmur, easily mistaken for the wind. I stood perfectly still, holding my breath, listening. There it was again, a man's voice, deep and familiar, and then a giggle. A high, feminine laugh that cut through the night and straight into my heart. A laugh I knew as well as my own. My blood ran cold. Number. It couldn't be. My mind scrambled, trying to find another explanation. A staff member, another guest, anyone but her. But my feet were already moving, pulling me forward against my will, drawn by the horrifying gravity of the truth. The cellar door was massive, made of heavy, dark oak. It was closed but not fully latched. A thin sliver of warm, dim light escaped from a crack near the hinges, painting a faint yellow line on the dark gravel. I crept closer, my movements slow, silent, every nerve in my body screaming. I pressed my ear against the rough wood, muffled words, laughter, the soft clink of a glass. I found a wider gap in the ancient planks of the door, a place where the wood had warped over time, just wide enough to see. I held my breath. I looked, and the world ended. It was them, Ethan and Chloe. They were sitting on an old leather couch tucked between barrels of wine, a single dusty lamp casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. He wasn't wearing his jacket or tie. She had kicked off her heels. A half-empty bottle of red wine sat on a crate beside them. It wasn't a moment of sudden, illicit passion. It was comfortable, familiar, routine. He was tracing circles on the back of her hand with his thumb. I heard his voice, a low rumble. "Can't believe she actually bought that you were just tired." Chloe's laugh, the same one I'd heard 1,000 times, now sounded like shattering glass. "She believes everything you say. She always has." The cruelty was breathtaking, the casual, smiling way they discussed my heartbreak. My gaze was frozen on them, unable to process the sheer scale of the betrayal. And then, as Chloe leaned forward to refill her glass, the lamplight caught something at her throat. A glint of silver. A locket. 2 lockets. 1 lie. It wasn't just a similar piece of jewelry, it was identical. The same simple chain, the same delicate engraving. The gift she had given me, the one that was supposed to represent our unbreakable, eternal bond, was hanging around her neck. It wasn't a gift, it was a trophy. A sick, twisted inside joke they were sharing at my expense, a secret symbol of my own humiliation. In that moment, everything I thought was real turned to ash. Our friendship, his love, my entire life. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed, beautifully decorated lie. And the woman who believed it, the naive girl in the white dress, she died right there silently on the wrong side of that door. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I simply turned away from the cellar door and walked back the way I came. The girl who had floated through her wedding day on a cloud of naive joy was gone, left for dead in the dark. In her place was someone else, someone cold and clear and quiet. The sharp gravel under my bare feet no longer felt like pain. It felt like a reminder that the ground beneath me was still solid, even if my entire world had just turned to dust. My movements were deliberate, measured. I walked back into the silent villa, the monument to my own stupidity. The wedding dress was still there, a crumpled white ghost on the floor. I looked at it, not with sadness, but with a strange, detached curiosity, as if it belonged to someone I used to know a long time ago. They had made a fool of me. They had laughed at my trust, worn my love like a costume. They thought I would break. They were about to learn how wrong they were. My plan began to form, not in a storm of rage, but in a calm, cold clarity. A public accusation would just be my word against theirs. They would paint me as the hysterical, jilted bride. I needed more. I needed proof. I needed a weapon. My eyes fell on my phone, lying on the nightstand next to his watch. The 2 pillars of my life had crumbled. I would have to build my own foundation now, brick by brick. And the first brick would be their own lies. Just then, a soft, hesitant knock came at the door. Chloe. Of course. The performance wasn't over yet. I took a deep, steadying breath. I arranged my face into a mask of fragile heartbreak. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I pressed record. Then I opened the door. She stood there, a perfect picture of concern, her brow furrowed and her lower lip trembling slightly. It was a masterful performance. I almost could have admired it if I didn't feel the sudden, violent urge to rip that identical locket from her throat. Isabel. Oh my God, I was so worried, she breathed, rushing in and wrapping her arms around me. Her hug felt like a cage. I let my body go limp, playing my part. I don't know what happened, I whispered, my voice intentionally shaky. She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, her eyes searching my face for the damage she had inflicted. "Where's Ethan?" "I saw him leave. Is everything okay?" Every word was a lie. Every touch was a betrayal. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. He said he was tired. He said he needed space. Chloe's face softened into a mask of perfect sympathy. "Oh, honey. Men get weird. It's probably just wedding night jitters. He loves you so much. You know that." She was comforting me. For the pain she herself had caused, the sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I had to physically clench my fists to keep from reacting. I let her guide me to the sofa, let her pour me a glass of water I didn't drink. I listened as she spun a web of soothing, empty words, each one being carefully captured by the small, silent device on the table. To trap a snake, you must let it think it has you cornered. I steered the conversation, playing the role of the insecure bride. Maybe he's having second thoughts. Maybe I'm not enough for him. "Don't you ever say that," she said, her voice sharp with fake indignation. "You are everything. He's just being a stupid man. He'll come to his senses in the morning, you'll see." My hand went to my neck, my fingers closing around the locket she had given me. "Our friendship is the only thing that feels real right now," I said, looking her straight in the eye. She didn't flinch. She just smiled, a sad, gentle smile. "Always, Izzy. You and me, always." That's what it stands for. The "it" hung in the air, that symbol of our friendship, our bond. The lie was now on the record. She stayed for a few more minutes, then gave me one last hug. "Try to get some sleep. Everything will look better in the morning," she whispered, her voice like poison. The moment the door clicked shut, my entire body went rigid. The mask of the victim fell away. I walked to the phone. I pressed stop. I saved the file. She offered comfort. I pressed record. She left thinking she had calmed the broken little bride. She had no idea she'd just handed me the loaded gun, and the sun was coming up. It was almost time for the party. I didn't sleep. I showered, washing away the night, the cellar, the ghost of the woman I was. I watched the water run clear down the drain. Then I got dressed. Not in white lace, but in a simple cream-colored dress. Clean lines, no frills. I put my hair up, a few deliberate pins securing it in place. I applied a single coat of deep red lipstick. This was not a costume. This was armor. I walked out onto the sun-drenched terrace. The farewell brunch was in full swing. Laughter. The clinking of forks on porcelain, the scent of coffee and fresh pastries, our families and friends all smiling, all blissfully unaware of the rot hiding just beneath the surface. It was a perfect, beautiful lie, and I was about to burn it all to the ground. I saw them sitting at a table near the fountain, Ethan and Chloe. They were trying so hard to look normal, laughing a little too loudly, avoiding each other's eyes. Chloe saw me first, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she waved me over, the concerned friend once more. Ethan wouldn't look at me at all. He just stared into his orange juice as if it held all the answers in the universe. I gave them a small, tight smile and took my seat. I let them sit in their discomfort for a few minutes. I let the lie breathe. Then I stood up. I picked up my glass. I tapped it with a fork. The cheerful chatter died down, replaced by an expectant silence. All eyes turned to me, the happy bride. I saw my parents beaming with pride. I saw his parents smiling with relief. And I saw Ethan and Chloe, their faces pale with a sudden, unnamed dread. "I just want to thank all of you for being here," I began, my voice clear and steady. "This weekend has been everything I dreamed of, and more." I let my eyes land on Chloe. "I especially want to thank my maid of honor, my best friend." I reached for the locket at my neck, holding it up so the silver caught the morning sun. "Chloe gave me this beautiful gift yesterday. She said it was for our eternal bond, a promise that she would always be close to my heart, my friend, my sister, my betrayer. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. I turned my gaze to Ethan. And of course, I have to thank my new husband. After he left me alone last night because he was too tired and needed space, I was so confused. A nervous murmur went through the crowd. My mother's smile vanished. But luckily, I continued, my voice dangerously sweet, Chloe was there. She came to my room to comfort me, to explain why my new husband couldn't bear to be in the same room as me on our wedding night. I looked from his face to hers. They were frozen, trapped. In fact, her words of comfort were so honest, so insightful, I felt they were too important to forget. I pulled out my phone. I opened the audio file. I pressed play. The sunny terrace went completely silent, broken only by the sound of Chloe's own voice, sweet and dripping with false sympathy, echoing from the phone's speaker. Oh, honey, men get weird. It's probably just wedding night jitters. The sound of that recording playing on that sunny terrace was the sound of a world ending. Their world. The aftermath was swift, brutal, and absolute. But that's their story to tell. Mine began the moment I got in my car, drove away from that vineyard, and never once looked in the rearview mirror. 5 years later. The city is my home now. The quiet rolling hills of Napa have been replaced by the roar of traffic, the canyons of glass and steel, and the endless pulsing energy of millions of lives moving forward. I own a small art gallery in the West Loop, a bright, clean space filled with the work of artists who have something to say. It's a life I built myself, with my own 2 hands, a life that belongs to no one but me. I was locking up the gallery for the night, the autumn air crisp and cool. The streetlights were just starting to cast a warm glow on the pavement. Isabel? The voice was rougher, thinner than I remembered, but it was a voice my bones would never forget. I turned slowly. It was Ethan. The golden, confident architect I had married was gone. In his place stood a man who looked worn. His expensive suit was rumpled, his shoulders were slumped with a permanent weariness, and there were faint gray streaks in his once perfect hair. He looked like a faded photograph of the man I used to love. He took a hesitant step forward. I can't believe it's you. You look amazing. I said nothing. I just watched him, a strange, detached curiosity washing over me. It was like seeing a character from a book you read long ago. You remember the story, but the feelings are gone. He kept talking, the words tumbling out in a desperate, clumsy rush. I think about you. All the time. What I did. Chloe and I, we were a disaster. It was poison from the start. Leaving you was the biggest, most idiotic mistake of my entire life. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that used to be charming and was now just sad. My eyes drifted to his wrist. He was wearing a cheap, flimsy watch, a ghost of the one he'd left on the nightstand. He lost my love. He lost my respect. Please, he whispered, his voice cracking. Just 1 coffee, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. For closure. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. And what I felt was not anger, not pity, not even the ghost of love. What I felt was nothing at all. He was a stranger, a ghost from a life that was no longer mine, and I do not talk to strangers. I met his pleading gaze. I gave a small, final shake of my head. I walked away. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I just melted back into the flow of the city, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk, a relic of a past I had already buried. He was a mistake, but he was no longer mine to make. Walking away from Ethan felt like closing the final page of a very long book. There was no anger, no lingering pain, just the quiet, satisfying click of a chapter that was finally, completely over. I didn't go home. I went to the one place that felt more like home than anywhere else in the world. I went to my gallery. The air inside was still and quiet, smelling of fresh paint, wood, and possibility. The high white walls were empty, waiting. Tonight was the night before our grand opening. My grand opening. Everything I had poured my money, my time, and my soul into for the past 5 years was in this room. It was a blank canvas, a new beginning, a world of my own making. In the center of the floor was the first piece, a large abstract canvas I had bought from a young, unknown artist. It was a chaotic storm of deep blues and blacks at the bottom, a representation of wreckage and ruin. But out of the darkness, bold, brilliant strokes of gold and white and crimson erupted upwards, reaching for the top of the frame. It wasn't a picture of peace, it was a picture of survival. I picked up a hammer and a nail. I measured the center of the main wall. I drove the nail home with one clean strike. As I lifted the heavy frame, I thought about the girl in the vineyard, the girl who believed that happiness was a perfect day, a perfect dress, a perfect promise from a perfect man. I don't resent her, but I don't recognize her anymore either. The fire of that night burned away so much, my trust, my naivety, my heart. I used to think it had destroyed me, but I was wrong. It didn't destroy me. It forged me. The scars are still there, of course. Some things never truly fade, but they are no longer wounds. They are reminders. A reminder that the deepest betrayals often come from the prettiest smiles. A reminder that sometimes the life you thought you wanted has to be burned to the ground to make way for the life you were meant to live. You learn that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you choose to get back up. I stepped back, looking at the painting hanging on my wall. It was the first of many. It was a declaration, a promise I was making to myself. The old world was gone, and I did not miss it. I had learned to build on the ruins. They broke my world. I built my own. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for listening to this story with me today. If you'd like to hear more, please consider subscribing, and I would be truly honored to read about your own family experiences and stories in the comments.